Hi there, community of Greenfield. I'm Superintendent Galvan, ready to read you another really great story as we continue story time with the superintendent. And so today we're going to read Paddington. He is so excited and he's a bear. And the bear family is something that's super important to us because we're all bears. We're Kodiaks, brown bears, golden bears, grizzly bears, all the wonderful bears that you can think of we have right here in Greenfield. And so today's a very special day for all of you. Let me say that in Spanish. Hola mi comunidad de Greenfield, yo soy la Superintendente Galvan del Distrito Escolar de Greenfield con otra historia para ustedes durante la semana. Sí, hoy vamos a leer Paddington y es un oso y osos son muy importantes a nosotros porque es parte de la familia. Tenemos los Kodiaks, los osos de oro, los osos cafecitos, los grizzly bears, los polar bears, todos tenemos aquí en Greenfield de las escuelas y por eso esta historia es muy importante para mí y ojalá que es importante para ustedes. So vamos a seguir adelante leyendo una historia para ustedes. So, Paddington. So ahí va a sentar mi amigo Paddington. Ahí se va a quedar. And I'm going to read the story to you. So here we go. This story is by Michael Bond and it's illustrated by R.W. Alley. So let's see what Paddington does for us today. So Michael Bond is the author of Paddington. So Paddington. Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on a railway platform. In fact, that was how he came to have such an unusual name for a bear, because Paddington was the name of the station. The Browns were waiting to meet their daughter Judy when Mr. Brown noticed something small and furry near the left luggage office. It looks like a bear, he said. A bear? Repeated Mrs. Brown. In Paddington Station? Don't be silly, Henry. That can't be. I wonder if it could be. Let's see. But Mr. Brown was right. It was sitting on an old leather suitcase marked Wanted on Voyage. And as they drew near, it stood up and politely raised its hat. Good afternoon, it said. May I help you? It's very kind of you, said Mr. Brown. But as a matter of fact, we were wondering if we could help you. You're a very small bear, said Mrs. Brown. Where are you from? The bear looked around carefully before replying. Darkest Peru. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway. Do you know what a stowaway is? Let's find out. You don't mean to say you're coming all the way from South America on your own? Is that what you're saying? Said Mrs. Brown. Whatever did you do for food? Unlocking the suitcase, the bear took out an almost empty glass jar. Oh, I ate marmalade. Bears like marmalade. Do you know what marmalade is? Marmalade is like jelly or jam. So let's see what he talks about. Mrs. Brown looked at the label around the bear's neck. It said quite simply, please look after this bear. Thank you. Look, and it's on this tag too. Please look after this bear. Oh, wow, Paddington, I wonder who wrote that. Oh, Henry, she cried, we can't leave him here all by himself. There's no way knowing what might happen to him. Can't he come home and stay with us? Stay with us? Repeated Mr. Brown nervously. He looked down at the bear. Would you like that? He asked Paddington. That is, he asked hastily, like he wasn't really sure if he should do that. If you have nothing else planned, oh yes, replied the bear. I would like that very much. I'm nowhere to go, have nowhere to go, and everyone seems in such a hurry around here anyways. So, that settles it, said Mrs. Brown. Now, you must be very thirsty after your journey, Mr. Brown. Can you please get some tea while I go and meet our daughter Judy? But Mary, said Mr. Brown, we don't even know his name. Mrs. Brown thought for a moment. I know, she said. We're call him Paddington. Paddington after this station. Paddington? The bear tested it several times to make sure it sounded very important. Paddington. Paddington. Yep, he likes it. Mr. Brown tried it out next. Follow me, Paddington. I'll take you to the snack bar. And there he went with his suitcase. Mr. Brown was he was good at keeping his word. Paddington had never seen so many snacks in one tray, and he didn't know what to try first. He was so hungry and so thirsty that he climbed up onto the table to get a better look. Mr. Brown turned away, pretending he had tea with a bear called Paddington. This station every day was part of his life. Henry, said Mrs. Brown when she arrived with Judy, what are you doing to that poor bear? Paddington jumped up, raised his hat, and in his haste, he sipped some of the strawberry tart, skidded on the ice cream, and fell over backwards on the cup of tea. Oh no, Paddington is making a mess. I think we'd better go before anything happens. Judy took hold Paddington's paw and said, come along, we'll take you home now so you can meet Mrs. Bird and my brother, Jonathan. Mr. Brown led the way to a waiting taxi. Number 32, Windsor Gardens, please, he said. The driver stared at Paddington. The bear is going to be extra. What? Sticky bear? Yeah, twice as much. And make sure none of this comes on my interior. My car is clean, and I don't want any junk on it. Well. The sun was shining as they drove out of the station, and there were cars and big red buses everywhere. Paddington waved to some people waiting at the bus stop, and several of them waved back. They were very friendly. Paddington tapped the taxi driver on the shoulder. Excuse me, sir? It isn't a bit like darkest Peru, he asked. The man jumped at the sound of Paddington's voice. Cream, he said. Cream and jam all over my coat. Thanks for that. Oh dear, Henry, murmured Mrs. Brown. I wonder if we're going to be all right. Fortunately, before anyone had time to answer, they arrived at Windsor Gardens, and Judy helped Paddington onto the pavement and into the house. She looks after us, Mrs. Bird. She's a bit fierce at times, said Judy, but she doesn't really mean it. I'm sure you're going to like her. So Judy's going to introduce her to Mrs. Bird. Goodness gracious, exclaimed Mrs. Bird. What have you got here? It's not a what, said Judy. It's a bear named Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us. A bear, said Mrs. Bird. Paddington raised his hat and said, well, he appears to have good manners. I'll say that for him. I'm afraid I stepped on a jar by mistake. I'm sorry, said Paddington. Ah, I can see that. You'd better have a bath before you're very much yuppier and older. Judy, can you help me, please? I think she likes you, whispered Judy. She does, said Paddington. Paddington had never, ever been in a bathroom before. While the water was running, he made himself at home. First of all, he tried writing his name on the steamy mirror. Then he used Mr. Brown's shaving cream to draw a map of Peru on the floor. Then he soon discovered that getting into a bath is one thing, but quite different trying to stay in there when it's full of soapy water. Oh my goodness, Paddington sure is having fun. Paddington tried calling out, help, help, at first in a quiet voice, and then he didn't really want to disturb anyone, but then he got loud. Help, help! When that didn't work, he began bailing the water out of his hat, but the hat had several holes in it, and the map of Peru soon turned into a sea of foam. The water started overflowing. Oh no, he's making a mess, boys and girls. Suddenly, Jonathan and Judy burst into the bathroom and lifted a dripping Paddington onto the floor. Thank goodness you're all right, said Judy. We heard you calling us. Whew, fancy making such a mess," said Jonathan admiringly. "You should have pulled the plug out." "There's a plug," said Paddington. "Oh, I never even thought of that." When Paddington came downstairs, he looked so clean that no one could possibly be cross with him. His fur was all soft and silky, his nose, so gleamy and shiny, and his paws had lost all the traces of the jam and the cream. The Browns made room for him in a small armchair, and Mrs. Bird brought him a pot of tea and a plate of hot buttered toast and marmalade, his favorite jelly. "Now," said Mrs. Brown, "you must tell us all about yourself. I'm sure you must have lots of adventures to tell." "Oh, I have," said Paddington. "Things are always happening to me. I'm that sort of bear, you know." He settled back in the armchair. "I was brought up by my Aunt Lucy in the darkest Peru," he said. "But she had to go into a home for retired bears in Lima." He closed his eyes thoughtfully, and a hush fell over the room as everyone waited expectantly for what he was going to say next. After a while, when nothing happened, they began to get restless. Mr. Brown tried coughing, then he reached across and poked Paddington. Like this. "Well, I never," he said. "I do believe that bear is fast asleep." "After all, that happened to him," said Mr. Brown. "I guess it isn't any wonder with all those adventures." So that is the story of Paddington the bear, who I'm sure has lots of adventures just like you, boys and girls. You are part of our bear family, and I'm sure you're going to have tons of stories to tell your teachers and the other people at your school when you come back. So I am Superintendent Galvan with the Greenfield Union School District. So happy to continue reading with you. I'm sending you a great big bear hug from our family to yours.